Hey everybody, and welcome to our February monthly live stream and giveaway. We have a couple special guests with us today. We have Bryce from Rega and Sound Organization and Jason from Kanto Audio. So we're going to be discussing all things turntables, two-channel audio, powered speakers, you name it. We also have Leon with us, who is the founder of Audio Advice. So we have a great wealth of knowledge here. So we're super excited. So today we're going to be going over all of that and then also announcing our giveaway winners. And so yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. So just to start this off, we're going to ask our panelists a few questions. So guys, just tell us a bit about what you do, if you have a beverage of choice, what you're drinking today, and then let's go over your first record. So Bryce, you want to start us off?
Okay, I am Bryce from the Sound Organization, and I look after a few brands, Rega being one of the most important ones or closest to my heart. You can tell from my accent, I'm a bit of a world traveler. I'm from Scotland originally and have sold Rega for 20 plus years, both in a lovely place like Audio Advice way back in my early days, and then grew up through the industry. Now I look after places like Audio Advice and hopefully do a reasonable job of it. I'm sadly at work still. Thus the Brit 5 flags behind me. So I don't have any beverage. I have water, sadly. So I'm letting the side down for all of us. But I'm sure I could muster up a beer somewhere in this building. And my first album, I can tell you the first that I can't really remember my first album that I bought in Scotland, but I can tell you what I bought when I moved here, which was Electric Warrior by T-Rex of all things. So that predates me by a few years, but I did buy it because I used it at shows, and I think genuinely there's nothing wrong with a bit of bowling. So that's my summary. Feel free to ask anything that you feel is important. I'll hand it off to Jason, really.
Awesome. Yeah, Jason, what you got?
So I am the product manager at Kanto. So part of my duties is just basically conceiving new products, working with the different teams in the organization to make sure that the concept is actually being completed, its targets are being met, people understand why we're building the product, and working with the engineering team, obviously, to get the product made. So been called the central nervous system of Kanto, since I connect a lot of the different organizations together and make sure everybody's on same task when it comes to product. Today I'm drinking I think it's a controversial beverage. It's the coconut LaCroix. Some people really hate it. So I dig it. Yeah, I'm also at work. It's 2 p.m. over here on the West Coast, so haven't cracked a beer, drank any wine yet. Maybe later, but right now just drinking LaCroix. And my first album, I have a couple first albums, I guess. The first album that I ever bought was Meow the Jewels by Run the Jewels. I gave that away because I didn't actually have a record player at the time. I just really wanted that album. Ended up giving away as a gift, and then ended up buying To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar as my very first album. So I got into the vinyl game pretty late in life. I've only had a record player for about 5 years or so.
Awesome.
That's up with me.
Well, those are a couple good albums, though. Well, Leon, what you got?
Well, so I'm Leon, the founder of Audio Advice. Happy to be on here again, and I'm in beautiful Wake Forest, North Carolina, and I actually have my first record. It's not my first album. It's "Help Me, Rhonda" from the Beach Boys, 1964. I was 10 years old. And I went up buying a bunch of other 45s. I actually cannot remember my first album. I think it was something from Three Dog Night, maybe, or Iron Butterfly, or Steppenwolf, somewhere in that genre. And since it is past 5 here, I have a Dogfish Head Hazy IPA I'm drinking. And cheers.
Awesome. Cheers. Yeah, and just introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nick. I'm filling in for Jonathan. Jonathan's normal host, but he's on a secret audio mission, so I decided to take the reins for today. I am one of our theater designers for the online side. So if you're getting a theater done, more than likely you're talking to myself. So yeah, as for what I'm drinking, I've got a Sycamore Stouts. They're special brownie, no pun intended. But yeah, it's outside of that, my first album. I think that my first album was Sticky Fingers by the Rolling Stones. It was a copy that was all ripped up, but loved that album. So I pretty much got it for Wild Horses at the time. Now I listen to that album front to back all the time. So it's definitely a good one. So going from there, a lot of the reason that people are here is we've got our live stream today and our giveaway. And so our giveaway here is a $1,200 value, and this is our Kanto U6s from Kanto Audio. Set of powered speakers, absolutely phenomenal. And then we have a Rega Planar 2, which is one of my actually first turntables. It's an awesome table. So yeah, this is a really fun package. And we also have a secret giveaway prize, which is for best question. So let those questions roll, and yeah, hopefully we get you all picked down. So we're gonna announce the winner at the end of this. So just to kind of start it off with some easy questions. Let's see what makes a good entry level setup. What should we be looking for? What should beginners take note of? Bryce, you want to kick it off?
Well, I'm sure everyone in the room will agree that source is the most important. It's got to be driven properly. Rubbish in, rubbish out. It's very computer. But honestly, the way I look at everything is invest where you can, front heavy, and then get the music out the back end of it. I know it sounds super simplistic, but that's why the way we look at it is it's a design thing. Focus on doing everything you can right for the monies that one has available, and then make the best you can with it. So it's honestly very important to us. Source first. I'll maybe throw it open to the floor to talk about if there's anything that I've missed, but I don't think there's much disagreement there.
Bryce, why don't you tell us about the P2 we're giving away?
Okay, so let me tell you about the Planar 2. So it's a beautiful looking creature. Obviously, it's got its little dust cover to stop the dust getting on it. Weirdly enough, all Regas, when you take the dust covers off, they sound better. So for all the Rega owners out there that have never tried it, take your lid off and put it to one side, because you're generally off your seat drinking hopefully more than water to flip the side of the record. So really the lid's superfluous in a lot of ways, but it's got a 10mm glass platter. And I saw a question about mats, which we can refer to later. And then you've got an RB220 tone arm, which is a super amazing aluminium tone arm that's got a 20 mg tolerance. So it's quite phenomenal. We don't say enough about it, but if you can imagine what's a record anyway, it's a little bit of plastic spinning round and round. So if you've got more force to make it read its job properly, you want that force to be as low as possible to make it work, which is why we test other people's things, and a lot of turntables take 60 mg or 3 times the force to move in their groove, which you can imagine can't be getting all the information off of the side of the record that you're playing.
Awesome.
Not to mention might hurt your albums too, right? It's a physical object.
Yeah, it's a physical object.
Pressing the groove, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can't. It's hard to kind of even. A lot of people start talking to me, and I start to say, well, remember when you look at a record, you see that little rainbow. That's the detail that we're talking about. You've probably all seen that little microscopic view of a needle in a groove. That if you can't get that right, it doesn't matter how much money you got on an amplifier, and it doesn't matter how much dollars you would throw at a Kanto speaker, you wouldn't get the result out the other end. So I think there's, weirdly enough, I think way back when I first, well, maybe even in Leon, when you first started, there was an awful lot of, amplifiers are amplifiers and turntables are turntables and speakers are where you should apply your money. It's kind of now totally flipped. And, I've got a few other fine turntable manufacturers to probably thank for that. Oh, there's my camera losing connection. To say yes, source is the most important, and it probably always will be.
Mhm. For sure.
I
Well,
agree. I'll never forget the first time I changed my cartridge on my turntable. I'm like, whoa, holy mackerel.
Yeah.
yeah, it's huge. Either Jason or Leon, do you guys have tips for kind of beginner setups? What a good entry level setup should have?
What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I do have to agree with Bryce in the sense that, you know, you're at the end of the day, you know, it is garbage in, garbage out. So you have to make sure your source is good. And what's nice now is let's just be honest, the audio landscape's different than it was even a decade ago. You can get really good speakers for a pretty low price. Like, you're looking at our U6, it's $500, and it has like everything built into it. And for most people, they sound really good. So that's not a lot of money. You know, you can definitely get a great sounding system, some great sounding speakers, but you buy a cheap turntable, it doesn't sound that great. It ruins your records because it's got too much force pressed into the groove. There's no real upgrade path except for just getting rid of it entirely and just getting a new one. Whereas, you know, if you get a nice turntable, you can just replace components. You can replace a tone arm, you can replace a cartridge, that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, I like the modularity of investing a little bit more on a turntable. And then with the speakers, I mean, I feel like the speakers are probably the most quickly upgraded part in an audio setup. Like, you know, if you get good components, if you get a good DAC, if you get a good turntable, you can ride those out for years and years and years and just keep upgrading your speakers, and it's always going to sound good because you had a good source to start with.
Mhm.
So I tend to agree with that too.
Yeah, just think long term. Yeah, if you're debating between two products, one may have a better DAC in it or a better phono stage, and you'll want that later on.
Mhm.
I got to tell the story about the Kanto speakers, though. So why do we have them?
Mhm.
It was the first time I'd been back to CES in about 15 years. And we were wandering down the halls. I think it was in the Venetian. And I walked by this room and it had all these wildly colored speakers in there. This is when you guys made speakers in 20 different colors.
Yeah.
And it drew me in, and I listened to them like, my gosh, these things sound so natural. And when I asked the price, I was shocked. And that's how we wound up with them. It was just purely a discovery at CES.
Yeah, and then what's nice is you guys have colors now of our products. You know, we got rid of a lot of the colors. Just you know, when you're an expanding, growing company like Kanto, and you start having warehouses and distributors around the world, it starts getting really hairy when you have that much product selection, you know, for a smaller company. So we ended
when
up
you had three colors of green, that's you maybe have too much.
So we reduced the color count, and but man, there was clamor, and there was people that really liked our colors. They loved our gloss teals and our gloss reds. So it's really cool that we could partner with you guys and offer some of those colors again that people really love.
Awesome.
Especially here in NC State country with the Wolfpack Red.
Yeah, and those reds, yeah, we're now the exclusive dealer of the red finish, which I really like. It's beautiful and works well for Valentine's Day here as well.
It certainly does. Oh, look at that.
Oh yeah, look at that.
That's a beautiful
Awesome.
setup right there.
So kind of on the same limb here, going back to powered speakers, what do you think? This is from Steve D, and it's what do you see as the main advantage of powered speakers versus passive in an amp?
Mm-hmm. So I've always seen it as a comprehensive solution for people who, I think that like our speakers cater to a nice demographic where it sits in between like an audiophile product and something up from like a sound bar. So I think it really appeals to customers who aren't interested in piecing together a component system. They maybe don't have the time to invest research, or maybe they don't care enough. Like there's a lot of people who need, like, I'm going to say musicians off the bat are like pretty notorious for this. They love music, but they don't really care about like the audiophile gear. It seems that there's almost like two different camps. So it's something that really appeals, I think, to music lovers, but not essentially gear heads. And I think the main advantage another main advantage, I'll say there's two, I guess, here, is just the compact size of it. Like if you're in a apartment or if you have a desktop, you're using your like work from home setup as your kind of main audio listening source, you can't have a lot of gear. In order to get a proper hi-fi system, it's not just a passive amplifier, or sorry, it's not just passive speakers and an amplifier. At some point you might want an external DAC, or maybe your turntable doesn't have a built-in Phono preamp, and maybe you have to buy a Phono preamp. It kind of starts adding up really quickly once you start getting a bit more serious. So I would say a powered speaker is just really like, it's simple, it's cost effective, and it's compact. So there's a lot of benefits to it. It's not for everybody, but we certainly see the reason why it's appealing.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think if you're in, the price range we're talking about for the U6s and stuff, it's really hard to find a passive speaker and amplifier that sounds like, or even find one, a combination put together, because you're not having to buy the box for the amplifier. The amplifier is sitting inside the speaker. When you make an amplifier, you got to make it so that it can drive any speaker you connect it to, whereas the amp and the powered speaker only has to drive that speaker. The characteristics of those drivers, so you can optimize it for those specific drivers. So I think it can be a very good value. And there's some uber exotic powered speakers that sound great out there. It's especially a good way to go in the, I'd say, under $500 or $600 for the whole package.
Yeah. And Bryce, Rega has some powered speakers as well, right?
No, we don't do powered speakers. We only do passives. We've reintroduced the Kite, which is an interesting discussion. Probably not for right now, but certainly happy to talk to people about it. But we do a little integrated amplifier, and we kind of lodged it as the getting started into audio system. So it's called the System 1. So Planar 1, IO, Kites, and we're going to package them all together. So not here in America yet, albeit that each separate component you could buy today if you really wanted. But we're going to probably put it in a big, enormous box and make it a get you going with stereo option, which you guys will know. I think you've already ordered them, so I can't really complain.
Awesome. Well, the
IO sounds amazing, but it's what, $600 or $700, so it's still
that's right. Yeah, I think we're playing to our strengths. We know that active speakers exist, and I acknowledge that they're a brilliant little thing too, for exactly the points Jason pointed at, because you're engineering the amplifier right behind the driver, so you know what's going on, and the physical restraint of the car, the box. So it makes a lot of sense, even from me with another hat on. But fundamentally, it's very true. To your point, Leon, it's like you can't, even shipping. Think about the weight of things. It's illogical to ship 10 boxes when 3 will do.
Yeah, and also, now I'll add to that, the convenience of powered speakers are huge. I've got a pair of powered speakers downstairs that I use on a turntable quite often, and they probably get used as much as my system upstairs, just because of just the sheer convenience of it. And they're simple for everybody in the house to use. So if somebody wants to go up there and cut it on, they don't have to worry about cutting on a streamer, amplifier, preamp, all of that. Rather, it's just one single unit. So it's pretty nice for everybody to enjoy. Jumping off of that, we'll kind of go over to turntables a little bit. Chris Est asked, what are the difference in cartridges, and what makes one better than another?
Well, I'll talk about what we do, and as with my Rega hat on again, in a way. So you've got moving magnet and moving coil, and one's about 100 times quieter than the other, if you must know the details. So obviously the one that's 100 times quieter needs a lot more amplification in the preamplifier stage. So that's why you'll find a lot of websites or advisors saying, is it an MM or an MC that you've got? Because an MC requires a hell of a lot more boost to make it behave properly. And really it's all to do with where the generator is, because generally on a moving magnet, you've got your cantilever and your generators on the back of the cantilever, and it's measuring from there. But as you can imagine, that's adding a lot of mass to the cartridge itself. So what or most moving coil providers do is they put the generator in the body of the thing, and then that's, if you pull up a picture of a Rega MC, you'll see a little cantilever and a tiny little iron cross. And what's unique about the Regas is we don't have a tie wire. Most moving coil companies have a little wire that ties this bit to that bit. But as you can imagine, tying two bits together mean inherent problems because they're tied together. So it's quite from a which is better. Moving coils is the best sounding one. They tend to cost quite a lot more money, but I suppose if you're into the hobby, what you want to do is listen to a baby magnet, a daddy magnet, a baby moving coil, then a daddy moving coil. And I know that's super simplistic, and I'm not going to get into which brand sounds better than any other, but we're designing our cartridges in the full knowledge of how our turntables behave. So I would argue that any Rega on a Rega table will sound the best that it could.
Gotcha. Hey, Liam, do you have anything to add in?
No, I would agree with Bryce. I think in general, moving coil cartridges, they just extract more detail because the cantilever is freer to move and pick up the little subtleties in the grooves better. But it is important, if you're going to go with a moving coil, to have a very good moving coil phono preamp, because as Bryce said, the signal's 100 times less in output. And that means anything that gets messed up in the phono preamp is amplified. So, yeah, and Rega makes a great phono MC and others above that work really well with their moving coils.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget the first time I heard a moving coil. It was like,
and that's the odd moment, isn't it? It's when you go,
it is.
Oh,
it is.
What's that? And
it was
you
actually
go,
a Koetsu.
Mm-hmm.
And I lusted after one ever since, and finally have one. So they're amazing.
Yeah, the moving coils sound awesome. And there are I wouldn't let that deter everybody. There are a ton of great moving magnets out there, and they go up to a pretty large range. And so as you move to different types of stylus, there are different cantilever materials, there are different stylus shapes. And one thing that's big to note with that is turntables don't have a ton of tonality on their own. The tonality, a lot of that lies in the cartridge itself. So you can change the sound of a turntable just by swapping out that cartridge. So that's another big one. We had, let's see, jump to another question here. I just had a great question from Dave. Well, I'll come back to that one. I just lost it here just a second ago. There it was.
I'm always impressed with the throngs of great questions, and I'm like, well, that's a good one.
I know.
That's also a good one. That's a quiet one. Oh, maybe I should dodge that one.
So what are you paying extra for when you buy a more expensive turntable? What are some of the main advantages that you guys think you get?
I'm going to sound like that old guy about life insurance. It's precision on the turntables. So in essence, the engine, if you looked at all the Regas together, they would look very similar to one another. But if you touched the tone arm in a 2 and you touched the tone arm in a 3, you'd feel more confidence in the way that it's been assembled. And that's a really strange choice of words, but ultimately, if you listen to them side by side, anyone with the wherewithal to buy a better one ends up buying the better one. And it's no magic. We wouldn't make 3 things that were similarly priced or differently priced if we didn't believe there was a merit to do so, because we would be happy enough making Planar 3s. I suppose, remember back to probably when you first started with Rega many years ago, Leon, there was the Planar 2 and the Planar 3, and then there was a Planar 9 up there that not many people rushed after initially. But then when they realized how good the 2s and the 3s were, everybody went, well, what about that daddy one? And people moved up, and in some respects, we've got a more comprehensive range than ever, with the Planar 1, the Planar 1 Plus with the phono stage, the 2, the 3, the 6, the 8, and the 10, if I'm not running out of numbers by now. So precision is and we care about each little thing. Like the reason the arm on the 10 is polished silver is to lighten it. It strengthens it and lightens it, oddly enough, at 0.7 of a gram lighter, which is a strange thing to be talking about, but that was the reason. It's not, it looks beautiful as an aside, but that's the purpose of it. So sorry.
Well, shaving 0.7 of a gram on a turntable is like shaving 7 pounds off a race car.
Yeah.
You're gonna do it.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, let's see. We had a few other questions here. We had one from Raja Osho. I hope I'm not butchering the name there. But he was asking, it's a Kanto related question. It says, is the Kanto U6 a good speaker to connect to a desktop PC? What do you think?
So for me personally, I don't usually recommend the U6 on PC because I personally don't like large monitors on my desktop. So it's a very personal opinion that I have, because I'm a 2.1 guy all day. If I can get a smaller speaker with a subwoofer, I usually go that route. Especially when something's sitting on top of my desk. I don't have a lot of room on my desk. I literally have about a 4.5 foot desk, so that would essentially kill any productivity I have for trying to have paper and things on. So I generally push people towards U4 and U, and then pick up like one of our sub 8s or a competitor subwoofer. We have normal sub outs on our speakers, so you can really pair it with whatever you want. We're flexible in that way. It's not proprietary. So that's what I would guide you towards. And U in particular, I actually really like for desktop because it's not grounded. All of our U4 and U6, because they have preamps built into them, they need to have a ground wire and earth connection. And sometimes that can trigger ground loops with PCs. So I'd say U is the safest bet. It's nice and compact. It sounds really nice, and yeah, you won't have any ground loop potentially.
That's really cool. Yeah, and yeah, I had a few people in chat asking more or less about like all-in-one speakers. What do you? This is probably a question for everybody too. It's what's the big advantage of going to a set of just active speakers versus going like an all-in-one like HomePod or other all-in-one speakers?
Stereo separation is just the one thing that pops to mind.
Imaging.
Right now. Yeah, I mean,
the
straight
band
up,
isn't
like
this thick.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, imaging it's whenever you have a left and right, the music lives in between the two speakers, and instead of just coming from one single source, so you can get a lot wider spectrum there. Very cool. So let's see. Well, actually, Jason, discuss the TUKs a little bit. Those are one that I found really cool. That's one of probably my favorite speakers that you guys
I love the TUKs.
Those are great.
Yeah.
Can you discuss those a little bit for everybody?
Yeah, so TUK's our flagship speaker. It is very we made it for particular situations. We made it good for desktop, for home theater, for like smart home use, connected to like an Echo or something like that, and then of course turntables. So we knew those 4 segments going into the product launch. That's what we wanted to make sure they were really compatible and capable with. So they're a very broad ranging speaker. So when I say that, if you look at the back of TUK, you're going to see a USB connection for desktop. You're going to see a dedicated Phono preamp input for your turntable setups, optical for connecting to a TV, and then you have 3.5 another RCA line level input for any legacy sort of devices that you want to connect to it. And of course, Bluetooth with aptX HD, essentially that highest bandwidth codec available. So it's incredibly versatile. It literally does everything. And it has really cool features that a lot of our competition doesn't have. It's got a headphone port on the front of it. So when we say it's good for desktop, we actually mean that. It's not just, hey, it has a USB port. It has a headphone jack. It's meant to be used on desktop. It works really well in that environment. It's got a low pass, high pass filter built into it for home theater use. So that's a feature that you usually see on receivers. But it's built into a bookshelf speaker. So, throw a subwoofer onto it. It alleviates any bass going to the woofers at 80 hertz. Send it all to the subwoofer, and now that amplifier is capable of giving more wattage into the mid-range and the high end. So,
yeah, that's what really impressed me, Jason. I think you guys were
tangible sounding difference. Yeah.
you guys were the first people to do that. And I remember when we first got the Tucks in, that preliminary pair, and tested them and then tried them with the sub. Most powered speakers, subwoofer out, doesn't do anything to the powered speaker. It just lets it keep playing the bass. And your other ones are the same way, right? They don't roll it off at all. But the Tuck takes the bass away from the speaker, which just opens it up. That was a huge difference.
Yeah, it's crazy because, like, you know, when you're playing at a loud volume levels, there's kind of two things that happen. You know, you end up getting distortion because a 5 1/4 inch driver can only push out so much bass. Tuck has really great bass, but you know, it's still going to have distortion. Fortunately, distortion in low end doesn't sound as bad as distortion in the mid range, so that's okay. But if you can free up any sort of distortion, then it's going to sound better. So alleviating the bass duties from the drivers is going to let the mid-range play more cleanly. And the second thing it does is it prevents audio compression. So, you know, an amplifier can only give up so much power before it kind of taps out. And so when you have a really quick, loud transient, like a snare drum, you will lose some realism when you're playing a speaker full range and the amplifier is kind of capping out. So if you take the wattage away, that's playing the sub bass, and you can put it into where a snare drum's hitting, all of a sudden that amplifier can provide a lot more power really quickly, and now that transient sounds very realistic. So it may sound like it's just, you know, for people who aren't super familiar with high passing, low passing, it might not sound like a big deal, but when you're playing loudly, it adds a lot of realism and clarity.
Yeah, well, those speakers, their bass was super impressive. That was one of the first things, you know, out of a bookshelf speaker of that size. It was very cool because I think we got one of the pre-production models, and we were just mind blown by them. Yeah, so
it's the beauty of DSPing. You know, you can essentially increase the bass, like, you know, and just squash everything else. So, you know, you're losing a little bit, well, not a little bit. You do lose quite a bit sometimes of overall volume level when you're doing that. But the net gain is that you have a bookshelf speaker that can hit 50 hertz, you know, at -3 dB with 0 issues. In room, you're going to hear down to like 40 hertz. That eliminates the need for a subwoofer in a lot of cases, depending on what type of genre you're listening to. So it's pretty impressive. You know, Tuck is an expensive speaker in the powered speaker scene. I wouldn't say overall. It's actually pretty budget oriented when you start getting into like audiophile stuff. But it's worth it in terms of the feature set that you get and the capability and obviously the sound quality.
Very cool. Well, kind of jumping on a little bit, I have to give Bryce some attention now with the.
Don't worry about it. I'm looking at all these questions going, oh, I'll answer that one. Oh, that one looks easy.
I know, that's the thing, is we get a ton of really great questions. Actually, you know what? I'll do a quick fire one from Jules McNubbin, maybe? Yep, there we go. So how far should speakers be from the turntable? Pretty quick answer, but something that's really important.
Keep them far apart if you can, because you can imagine the energy. What's a turntable? It's a vibration measuring tool when you get down to it, a wibbly diamond in a groove. So you've got a big canto going like the clappers here, and the wiggle or the vibration will shake through the proverbial table and make this stylus wiggle and wobble inappropriately too. And you can get a feedback loop of problems. So you want to keep them as far apart as possible, and that will give you better results. Certainly if you get the imaging and all that properly set up too, you'll not have any problems. You know, I weirdly enough have some active speakers in a spare room with a wee turntable between them, and I have no problem. But I do know if I move my turntable right next to an active speaker, it will make a horrible noise because of exactly what I was talking about.
You'll know it when you have them too close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll happen as you turn up the volume.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you get the dreaded feedback loop. That's one of the most popular questions that we get from people buying their first table. Is like, every time I turn it up, it makes this loud roaring sound. It's just a constant loop, and it can be dangerous for your speakers. So always be super mindful of that if you're getting your first table. Make sure that they're separated as much as possible and isolated. And you know, even if you don't have the feedback loop, it just makes your bass less tight. whenever that bass starts hitting, it causes vibration, and can make that a lot looser. So
Yeah, and if you have to, you can put little isolation feet under the speaker to help isolate it, and but just don't put it right next to the turntable.
I get that question occasionally in any given month, and then I say, "Oh, you've got one of these clever phones. Take a photograph of what you're experiencing, or take me a video." And then you see them buttressed up against one another, and you go, "Well, there's a wee starter for 10. Can you move the turntable on the credenza to the left hand side where that lovely vase is?" And they go, "Oh yeah, that fixed it." I went, "Well, I can't speak about what your vase was doing for your audio system."
yeah, and I've seen some people wall mount them as well, because you guys have a wall mount rack.
Yeah,
right?
a bracket. And that's probably the least thought of turntable upgrade that people don't do. You know, putting it onto a wall isolates it from the floor, and therefore you get better results from your turntable.
Yep.
So it's an important thing that a wooden shelf would do it, but we have a bracket that's kind of orientated for the feet, and it's again super structure of light aluminium that's strong. So light and rigid is the order of the day when it comes to Rega.
Awesome. So we got a question here from John Kimker. So it's a question for you, Bryce. It says, would you recommend upgrading just the cartridge or the entire turntable when looking for better sound? And at what point would you make that transition?
Well, I'll speak from from a Rega stance. Really is that you want to get the thing rotating properly, then you want to place the tone arm where it needs to be in the record, and then cartridges last but not least, in our opinion. So we have a myriad of tables, we have a myriad of cartridges. We're not going to make that decision for you. We kind of put some suggestions out there so you can listen to them and see what you think. But I've heard a Planar 6 with our baby cartridge on it sound wonderful. And I'm not telling people to rush off and buy a weird combination, but it's not something that you should be afraid of asking to audition if you can. Say, can I hear the best turntable my reasonably sized checkbook can afford with a little modest cartridge on it? So even though I was talking about moving coil cartridges a little while ago, think of them like wheels on a motor car. They're a consumable. So a cartridge is exactly that. It will burn out, or you'll use it up over a few years. So in some respects, start in the journey of turntables, and maybe start with a modest but good cartridge. I'm sure Leon will probably touch on the journey to his Koetsu that he's got now. He's probably gone through far more cartridges than we have time for today. But I get the point that you've probably done the journey as time.
Yeah, Bryce, I agree 100%. Because the table you're going to have forever unless you change that, and getting that speed right and the isolation and everything at a tone arm with minimal friction, that's the key. You're exactly right.
Perfect. Yeah, that's my advice to everybody. Go ahead and get the best turntable that you can, even if it means getting a lower quality cartridge. You can always upgrade that cartridge. So that's perfect. We have a question from the Donut Man. If you have powered speakers, do you still want a phono stage? If not, does getting one help your sound? So this is another common question that we get. So anybody want to take this one?
Well, not all powered speakers have phono stages built in. So very roundabout answer is that sometimes you do need one. Yeah, I mean, if you're talking specifically about Kanto speakers, pretty much all of our mid-range to high-end stuff has a built-in phono stage. But it's a phono stage that's in a $420 up to $1,000 speaker. There's no way we can dedicate the amount of engineering time, components, that sort of thing, that an external phono stage can bring you. So what I usually recommend to people is, if you are just looking for a basic setup, go for it. But you can always upgrade your phono stage in the future. You don't have to use our built-in preamp. You can just switch it over to line, and then you can run an external phono stage. And at that point, you can hear the difference yourself. If you don't feel like it brought that quality that you were looking for, maybe you don't need that external phono stage. But if you can hear the difference, then boom, you're enjoying your audio even more.
That is an accurate, and I'll agree with that 100%, really, because you can try it. There's no reason not to. You may find that it's worlds better with an external stage, or you may go, oh, they've really done a cracking job on the stage inside the speaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Phono preamp's a great thing to start upgrading to. That's another way. We were talking about tonality with the cartridge. Phono preamps can change your tonality as well. Not the Kanto doesn't have a good one right out of the box, but they go up to thousands of dollars. So tens of thousands actually. But so from there, kind of on the same note, Bryce, if you guys had, well, Bryce and Jason, if you guys both had this set up, what's the first thing that you would upgrade, like the giveaway setup? So if you had the P2 and the YU6s or the U6s, what's the first thing you think you would change?
I would consider putting a better cartridge on the turntable, but only if I heard a benefit of said cartridge. So that's a bit of a vague answer. How did you like that? That was pretty smooth. Did anyone notice? I did. I'm saying it, but try it and see if you genuinely hear a difference. Because I only want you to invest any money in a genuine improvement. Because I think the industry as a whole sometimes talks about changes, not improvements. So sometimes people go, oh, I want to do this. And I've got them on the phone, I pick up the phone and I speak to them and I go, you need to talk to a store about making a genuine step forward, not just changing your XYZ for a ABC. Because honestly, it can surprise you. I would be sometimes pleasantly surprised at the results that a tiny cartridge upgrade to a modest turntable can bring.
I would buy the speaker stands.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's actually probably better. Yeah, best answer. I'll shut up because
I'm actually gonna go. I'm gonna go a different route than all you, and I would pick up a subwoofer actually because
after the speaker stands.
As much as I love speaker stands, U6 at the end of the day is limited by physics, and it'll play maybe into the 60 hertz region in room. If you buy even the most cheapest subwoofer, you'll be hitting down to 30 hertz in room. So you unlock a whole extra octave of audio in the low end space by adding a subwoofer. So I would probably go that route if we're talking about an upgrade to the system, because you know what, like the P2 is a very, very capable turntable, because I use the P1 with my TUK, and the P1 with TUK is it's
I promise you we didn't sponsor this. I can
we
promise
found
this
this out today.
We found this out
accidentally.
Yeah, it was
serendipitously. The P1 is my turntable of choice. I ended up getting a second. I got a U-turn turntable as a secondary turntable, because I actually have two different. I got my downstairs home theater, which has the P1, and then I got my U-turn upstairs in a more like compact arrangement. But yeah, Rega was my very first turntable, so couldn't have planned it any better.
Good. Well, that was fortuitous, if nothing else.
Yeah, Leon, wasn't your first table Rega as well?
It was an original planar 2.
Yep.
Had the wood trim on it, Bryce.
Oh yeah, we've got one somewhere in the building.
And I totally butchered it. It's when you guys didn't have tone arms.
Oh yeah, they probably.
I bought it without the arm and put an Infinity Black Widow tone arm on it.
Oh well, there we go.
Yeah, one of my first ones was, like I said, was a Planar 2 as well. I had a Technics 1200, and switching over, and now granted, the 1200 is a great table, the original ones, but the speed control I think on mine was a little wonky. Reason probably I got it as a good deal, but switching over to a Planar 2 after that, because when I first started working for audio advice, it was a world of difference. Now, given maybe comparing a broken table with a new table is not fair, but they're a great table. Still have it. It works really well. But so jumping from there, Bryce, a lot of people are asking about different accessories and things. Do you recommend a clamp on your table or a weight?
No.
Yes.
The plan of action with us is we want as low mass as possible, and I saw someone talk about mats, and I
Mhm.
can touch on the mat for a wee second,
Yeah,
and
please
we'll go
do.
to clamps as too. The mat is a decoupling from the table. So if you can imagine, you've got your plinth, you've got your hub. This is a convenient thing I've got on my desk. So we've got our lump of glass here, and then we have a mat that isolates that from the structure below. So in some respects, the woolen mat that Rega is known for, a lot of people phone me up, oh, it seems to come off with the record as I lift my records off. But actually, if you were to look at it under a microscope, it's a bit like Velcro, and it hooks into the record on the underside. So it's a little bit frustrating, but it allows for it to be held properly without any need for clamps and mass and other things. Because all that putting a clamp on tends to do is it creates a resonant frequency elsewhere in the spectrum. I saw some commentary about heavy turntables versus light turntables, and we want to get as little spurious energy in the product as possible. So there's I'm not going to comment. There are thousands of people that make lots of accessories, some of which we've experienced ourselves, and most of them don't really improve things. They change things. So weirdly enough, that's reminiscent of my last statement about make sure it's genuinely better rather than just feeling like it's a change. Because I understand putting a different coat of paint on the wall maybe makes the place look a little bit better, but it's still the same apartment.
Bryce, I have to agree with you.
Yeah.
I think the major turntable manufacturers design their turntables to work a certain way, and you're really changing that by switching out a mat. Now, in the early days of turntables, a lot of them had really cheap kind of rubber mats, and there were all these aftermarket mats like Platter Matter that came out, and those actually did improve the sound of those. But if the turntable company manufactured it thinking, okay, if you add this clamp, that's going to improve it, then that's the way to go. But Rega didn't do that. They don't make theirs. They're designed the way they are. Keep the Rega mat. Don't add a clamp to it. There are other brands that design their turntables for that to be an upgrade, and then it's fine.
I tried one many years ago on mine, and I went, it doesn't really make a difference. Oh, and now it's gathering dust beside all my records. That was a waste of £65. So I'll talk from my experience, not the Rega stance, but it's funny that I thought, I'll give it a try. Waste of time. I could have bought 2 records.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the design philosophies too, because you look at maybe like the Planar 8 versus some other similarly priced tables. The Planar 8 weighs less than almost every one of those tables.
Absolutely.
And then you have some other brands like BPI and EAT that are higher mass designs, and so I think some of the EATs even come with their own record clamps. So I think it's design perspective. Both are just as valid as the other, but definitely
from a design perspective, we've gone one way and other people have gone another way. We've tried some things, and most of the time we've not been happy with our results, because Rega Research, it's Rega Research Limited if you get their full name. So we're playing around with all sorts of materials. If you ever get the pleasure to watch some of the videos of the factory, you sometimes see some of the interesting things that we're up to. Fiddling around.
And I'll have to show you guys something really cool. I had this on my desk before. This is something that Bryce gave me a while back, and it shows the accuracy. Let's see if everybody can see it. Shows the accuracy of Rega's machining for their aluminum subplatter. So whenever you spin this top, it actually flips up on its top itself and stays there forever. So Bryce, you guys made how many of these?
1,000 in the world. So it's to establish mass, because it's weirdly enough the mass discussion, because a lot of people say, we want a huge, massive plinth, and we want a really good tone arm, and we want a big clamped weight on top of it. So actually what we do is you spin that thing, and it's probably hard for you to do in shot, Nick, but you spin it and it will invert, and you'll notice it's a more stable when the mass is up top, rather than it looks like it will spin the other way. It's a weird, almost optical illusion thing.
I would try my best to spin it,
Yeah.
but there's no way I can do it on here. But yeah, it stands up like this, and it looks like it should spin like this. Stays right there on top. It's really cool. So jumping off of that, well, actually, somebody just asked about replacing the sub platter. That I think that probably applies, Bryce. What do you think under the same thing?
We match them to their task. So people choosing to do that are kind of committing a change that is kind of off menu. It's like going to the Ford dealership and putting them on my Chevrolet. It's not that it couldn't be done. It's just I would choose not to. We understand that there's entire businesses devoted to tweaking things, but we've never. I'm not. I'll leave them to do their bit, and I'll do my bit. But we do a lot of work, and we buy a lot more quantity than a lot of these companies. So we match them ourselves. So it's not pertinent for people to play at home. I suppose they can play, but then if they go back to the original and go, oh, that's probably as good, they might be surprised.
Gotcha. So staying on the turntable topic, a question from Timothy Ziegler. Speaking of Technics, I guess it was back when we were on the Technics discussion. What's the benefit of belt drives versus a direct drive? Now, I'll put this kind of in the entry level field rather than just in general, but just the entry level field. What do you guys think that the advantage is?
We use it for in essence, having the belt away from the motor allows for there to be less vibration, because you can imagine a motor at the bottom of a turning point. It's wobbling and shaking and adjusting all the time. So in essence, that's why we've got a belt there. So it isolates you've got to get a good drive. That's why it's relatively close in proximity to the hub, but we don't want this motor to make a tremendous wobble on the bit where we've got a tone arm about to be reading the information. So really, the benefits of a direct drive, and taking my hat off and going back to the Technics campus, if you're a DJ, that'll start instantly. So you can mix with a direct drive, and you couldn't do that with a belt drive.
Yeah, it spins backwards easily too, with the motor turned off on a direct drive.
Yeah,
but I've always just felt like a direct drive, especially in entry level, it's constantly correcting, trying to get to the right speed, and our brain senses that. Belt drive may have more wow and flutter over the long term, but you don't hear that. What you hear are those instant changes in wow and flutter, that once you have the flywheel effect of a heavy glass platter going, your speed's super, super consistent, which just makes you feel like you're more at a live concert.
Yeah, it's like a jump in speed. Just one quick one drawn out over 10 seconds is not noticeable at all. And that's a big thing I did notice from myself transitioning over. Another question, Kanto, we've got this one for you. Performance-wise, what would the it's SYD, is that SID? Is that what you guys call it? You just call it the SYD, the SID, be comparable to the U6 or the U4s?
So SID is essentially a set of U4s that are in the same cabinet. SID is a product that I usually only recommend for people who legitimately need a compact all-in-one speaker and don't have the ability to do a stereo setup. There's a lot of compromise when you put two drivers into the same box that are playing left-right content. There's potential lobing when you have two drivers that are playing right beside each other. They're not really playing as a point source anymore, and the waves coming off of them will interfere with each other and stuff. So even though U4 and SID use the same drivers, you will get better audio quality from a U4 simply for the fact that they are separate. So you're going to have less comb filtering, lobing issues, and of course you get the stereo imaging, which we were, Leon and I were just, talking about a few minutes ago, is like you can legit have one of the greatest measuring mono speakers and then compare it to a set of average stereo speakers, and stereo speakers will probably wow you more because you'll actually get real imaging, which is more like the depth, and you'll get good soundstage, which is the width. So yeah, they're not really comparable. Unfortunately, the SID does sound nice when you compare it to, say, like a Bluetooth speaker from a consumer brand company, but stereo all day.
Gotcha. Well, we got time for a few more. In the meantime, I feel obligated to ask this. We've seen it a few times. It's impossible to explain here in 5 minutes. But what do you guys think the main advantage of analog versus digital is from a sound, tangible perspective? I have to ask it. It's impossible to answer.
Yeah, I was going to say this is going to be quick.
It's been asked too many times.
I was going to say there's probably a question about that. I don't tend to listen like a calculator, so I don't really like digital things as much. Albeit that I think they've come a huge way. From when I used to be in. I suppose let's talk about my personal experience. When I was last in a shop, which was a good few years ago, in Scotland, the DACs that have come out since I have been over in the United States have embarrassed what I used to sell, regardless of price, in Scotland. And that's because it's probably quite a Moore's Law effect in the world of digital. Whereas analog, I would argue, not many people actually understand the science that well, even though we've got hundreds of years worth of science behind it. But I think some of the principles were perfected, maybe even in the late 60s, that people are evolving and getting better at. I'm sure Jason, with his clever brain, will probably echo the same sentiment. Some of the ideas aren't new, they've just not been implemented properly. And now with silicon and things getting faster and technology, you can make stunning equipment that doesn't cost what it used to cost.
Yeah, there was the Hi-Fi Summit in 2020 that I did a whole talk about the benefits of power speakers, and I really nerded out on amplifier design in that talk, and the strides we've made in the filtering of switching amplifiers has gone like crazy. Like, there is TI makes chips that I think they switch at 2.1 megahertz or something, which means the filter stage on that product is so simple. You can use a ferrite bead in order to get rid of the switching noise. So I don't know. It's really cool. For me personally, the analog versus digital debate is digital for me has always been about instant gratification. I love streaming. I listen to music, wherever I go, and I can't do that with analog. But man, it's so fun to have a tangible physical object that contains music and being able to interact with it, flip it over, read a big booklet of, see the credits and oh, hey, the engineer on this did this. I don't get that with streaming. I never nerd out on the who produced this album and stuff like that, I do with vinyl, because it's right in front of me and I'm reading the liner notes. So it's just more immersive when you go analog, for sure. But it's just obviously not for every use. It's
that's right.
Kind of for home use.
I'm laughing there on the inside. I'm going, right, when I'm dead, my son's going to have to move a hell of a lot of records. That would be hilarious.
I know. I was moving recently, and my I don't have much vinyl. I probably got 40 records and stuff. Oh my god, this is the heaviest box that I have in the house. What the hell happened?
Well, Nick, you've done a lot of moving, and you were touching on how many records you have scattered around.
Yep, I've got records, and about this right here is literally just a touch of some of my favorites. This is a full shelf. I've got almost every single closet, garage, everything full of albums. There's differences between. I probably listen to about an even amount of digital as I do analog. I think that it's hard to say which one's 100% better. I mean, there are obvious differences between the two. I think it's easier to get a great sounding digital setup for less money than an analog setup, because I think it takes more money to kind of create that. You can buy a DAC now for $200 that sounds really good, versus, and those, you don't know, a DAC's a digital to analog converter. And it sounds fantastic versus a turntable, once you get up into the more expensive ones, when it starts to sound better. But the physicality and finding new music are huge for me, because you can find, you go to a used record shop, look at labels that you like, look at artists that you like, and you may find stuff that you'd never heard before. And you're probably unlikely to do that on digital formats. So awesome. Well, Leon, did you have anything to add?
No, that would be a long tail. I think both have their place. Yeah, I do think, if you're into analog, you got to make sure the recording was analog, because it doesn't, if you're playing a record that was recorded digitally, you're still listening to digital. Mm-hmm. So, as I've gotten back into vinyl in the last few years, that's they'll repress a lot of albums that us old farts like. And when they do it, they digitize them, and I get them, and they're like, whoa, this doesn't sound as good as the original. Mm-hmm. And I paid $60 for this 180 gram thing. And I do a little research and figure out, oh, they digitized it. So,
yeah. Well, it's a good note to end on, everybody. I think we have a few things to cover. So we've got our giveaway winners. So let's go over best question first. I think the panel agrees that Steve D, the main advantage of powered speakers versus passive and amp. That was a really thought-provoking question. So you are the winner of a set of Kanto U's and a record cleaning kit. So awesome there. Big round of applause for him, everybody. And now for the overall winner for the giveaway drawing was Joshua Leader in Boston, Massachusetts. And so he wins a $1,200 Rega and Kanto package. So congratulations to him.
Look at that.
Awesome.
Very nice.
Awesome. Well, that about wraps up the conversation for today. So I want to thank everybody for joining. Thank you, Bryce, and both Kanto and Rega as a whole. So we really appreciate you guys taking out the time to come in today. And we look forward to the next month. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, look forward to that. Cheers.
Thanks.
See y'all.
Bye.